Hello everybody, Michael Tracy here. So last week I at TYT Investigates reported on a memo that was authored by the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, and sent to a multitude of candidates and campaign managers associated with the 2018 midterm congressional elections. So the DCCC, at this relatively early juncture in the electoral cycle, is sending out these memorandums to certain candidates outlining some requirements or mandates that the DCCC sees fit to impose. Now, one of the challenges in interpreting this memo is it's not exactly clear what legal force it would have, or it does have. So the contract, which you can, or the memo, which you can see on the article that was posted last week, is structured in a sort of pseudo-contractual form. So it, at the end, requests a signature from the candidate agreeing to abide by the terms that are laid out therein. But at the same time, according to just a commonsensical kind of reading of it, and in speaking to lawyers associated with different campaigns, there's not a great amount of clarity as to what legally this makes binding upon the candidates were they to sign it. So that kind of leads one to believe that the principal rationale for the DCCC sending out this memo is more political than it is legal. And what would be the reasons for the DCCC pursuing a political goal by way of sending out this memo of understanding that looks sort of like a contract? Well, if you look at the memo, you might get some hints. Number one, the memo lays out certain guidelines pertaining to sexual harassment, obviously a huge issue presently. But at the same time, the memo doesn't lay out any specific that a staffer who is working in a particular campaign has in terms of reporting misconduct to higher-ups at the DCCC should they encounter some kind of harassing or abusive conduct. So what could this be said to accomplish if you're the DCCC? Well, if you want to insulate yourselves from legal, political, or political backlash, should something untoward occur in one of these campaigns, you can say that, well, we put certain language into this memo of understanding that was sent directly to you, the candidate, and whether or not you fulfilled your obligations under the sexual harassment category, we are now insulated from political liability or legal liability because we included it. So that's all a roundabout way of saying that there's nothing necessarily that's tangible within this memo of understanding which could actually prevent sexual harassment, but it gives the DCCC an out if later on somebody with a grievance says the DCCC had some kind of responsibility to institute policies to thwart this kind of behavior and didn't follow through. The DCCC can just respond and say, well, here it is in this memo of understanding, which we sent to various candidates. What's nice about this reporting is that you can actually go and read through the memo for yourself and draw out your own conclusions. And again, that's in the article that was posted last week, which will obviously be linked to in the description box of this video. And also notable from a political standpoint in the memo is this requirement that the Democratic primary candidates who are not victorious in their primary election They are supposed to, per the terms of this memo, engage in a quote-unquote unity event after the primary. So they are mandated, should they sign this agreement, to hold some kind of unspecified event with their former rivals for the Democratic nomination and put on a show of unity into taking on the Republicans. Well, I guess there's some political logic there, but given that there seems to be an influx of candidates from non-conventional backgrounds flooding into various Democratic primary races around the country, it's not crazy to view that stricture as a way to kind of enforce some kind of relatively superficial sense of a united front where it doesn't really exist. Now, you can debate to what extent the Democratic Party truly is unified. Are there still these fissures that are left over from the 2016 presidential primary, which actually are, on a practical level, inhibiting a true unity? That's debatable, but nonetheless, it is within the clear political interest of the DCCC and other kind of establishment organs to put on the appearance of unity. And to make that a requirement of their candidates. I mean, there are also mandates that are imposed that are so vague that there could be differing interpretations. And when you have such a vague set of requirements, it is not far-fetched to envision that the DCCC will make use of that vagary and penalize disfavored candidates using a kind of debatable interpretation of the requirements. So one of those requirements that would be debatable and which is not really clear cut is that the candidates are not supposed to do anything which may damage the chances of the Democratic candidate in their district to win against the Republican in the general election. Well, there are some people who claim that Bernie Sanders damaged Hillary Clinton's prospects in 2016 simply by leveling substantive criticisms of her during the primary. And maybe there is some merit to that. I mean, there might be some people who listened to Bernie Sanders' critique of Hillary and said, he has a point. Maybe this is going to dissuade me to some extent from voting for her in November. Does that mean that those criticisms were unwarranted? No. It simply means that in politics, when you have legitimate issues being fiercely debated, that can have a long-lasting impact on people's perceptions of the candidates in question. So, given how vague a standard that is, and given that there's such a wide array of potential conduct that could fall within that category of doing things that which may damage a candidate in the general election, you could imagine pretty easily that criteria being kind of dangled over the heads of candidates in primaries as a way to either penalize candidates who are not necessarily in line with the DCCC or the Democratic establishment, whatever kind of phrase you want to use, and that certainly is the worry among different candidates and staff that I've spoken to. It's funny because for the most part, it seems as though the candidates don't even want DCCC involvement beyond pure financial resources. They don't want any kind of message crafting services. They don't want to be force-fed a list of stamp-approved consultants or communications professionals or these other people in the Democratic Party professional class who have failed so spectacularly, so consistently in recent history. And I think they're correct to have that apprehension. But at the same time, when you're running in a primary race, which is relatively low turnout, just a shift of a few thousand votes here or there can make a big difference. And so, if you have the DCCC and its allied organizations in Washington throwing their weight behind a certain candidate, it makes sense that that could be seen as a real threat among certain maybe more left-wing candidates in different primary races.